Are you ready for National Black Girl Month? April is National Black Girl Month, and this year we're centering Black motherhood. National Black Girl Month is a call to celebrate, invest, and champion Black women and girls. Join the movement and spread the spark. Visit nationalblackgirlmonth.com. Welcome to Impact Innovators with Felicia Ford, where we dive into the strategies that empower changemaker brands to leave a lasting legacy. Think of this podcast as your audio playbook for meaningful action. What's possible when thought leaders, disruptors, and pioneers align to share their journeys? I'm Felicia Ford, your host, bringing together the brightest minds and the most groundbreaking ideas to help you drive change, navigate through the sticky stuff, and elevate your brand. Whether you're tackling funding hurdles, looking for growth strategies, or seeking the perfect balance between profit and purpose, we've got you covered. Stay tuned and be a part of a movement that's setting new benchmarks in how we think about progress, community, and viewing. Let's innovate, impact, and inspire. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Felicia Ford, and I have with me again today Dr. Rikesha Fry Brown co hosting with me. And we have another incredible guest for you today for National Black Girl Month, where we are centering conversations around Black motherhood. So, what does it mean to mother while Black? It means raising children in a world that sees them first as a statistic before ever knowing their story. It means navigating expectations of strength, of sacrifice, of perfection, while carrying the weight of history on your back. It means rewriting narratives that were never meant to include us. But Black motherhood is also resistance, it is legacy. It's care shaped by a deep understanding that to nurture a child is to prepare them to walk through a world that may not always be kind to them, and to make sure they know they belong anyway. Dr. Michelle S. Hite has spent her career unpacking these complexities. As an associate professor of English at Spelman College and the director of the Ethel Waddell Giffey Honors Program, she explores race, culture, and identity through literature, public scholarship, and storytelling. Her work, featured on NPR and in collaborations with the Spelman College Museum of Fine Art, examines how Black life, grief, and legacy are represented in cultural narratives. She is currently working on a monograph about Toni Morrison, further cementing her place in the conversation on Black literature and intellectual thought. In this special National Black Girl Month episode, Dr. Rikesha and I are sitting down with Dr. Hite to explore the realities of Black motherhood, how race, gender, and socioeconomic status shape our experiences, how stereotypes and systemic challenges affect the way we parent, and how Black mothers are actively rewriting the narratives imposed on them. Dr. Hite, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We're so excited. We've been having so many conversations with so many women who are bringing in their perspectives and their thoughts and encouragement and also some tools. And so we're going to just jump right in with how your work explores culture and race and identity. How has your research shaped your perspective on Black motherhood?
I thank you for the question. I thank you for the invitation to be here. And it's interesting that you asked because we're having this conversation after I just left a class that I teach, that I designed called When Sorrows Come, Death and Mourning in African American Culture.
Mm,
And Emmett Till haunts the class. Um, and so, of course, his mother does as well.
right.
And a part of what, I spent a lot of time on in the class and thus with students working on is sort of helping them to appreciate the accomplishment of Emmett Till's mother, right? Her ability to lead a full life
Mm,
after, the horrible tragedy that she faced.
mhm.
And, not all mothers did survive in that way. I mean, often what happens is that the destruction was self-destruction. 'Cause to Toni Morrison's point, no Black women historically have ever pushed over a bus or attempted to of white children the
Mm,
way that many white mothers did when Black children were integrated into their schools.
right.
So, but in some cases, the destruction was individual, right? Because
Mhm,
of Mamie Till Mobley's prominence, we imagine that that kind of heroism was available for everyone. But a part of what I was saying to them just today is that what happens when you look at someone like her as a mother is that what it means to sort of be heroic is to think about your motherhood within the context of the everyday. I mean, because it became an achievement just for her to get out of bed
mhm,
and to have encounters with something other than grief.
mm,
But we imagine that if she lived long, and she did, right, past her son's death, that there were days that she laughed and smiled and danced. Um, and so, right, like that joy was possible, right?
mhm,
And so I just find that extraordinary. So, what it looks like for me to sort of teach other Black women who may one day be mothers themselves is to sort of help them to understand that the extraordinary happens for us every day.
mhm,
In the sort of way that Black women continue to seem to remain committed to being ethical, to being better than they were the day before, to sort of right to thinking about our own mothers and the answers that we might get from them.
mhm,
So it's really meaningful work, that isn't necessarily thing and I have written about this, but it is something that I just sort of think about in an everyday kind of way and marvel at
mhm.
who, um
Right, right. I as soon as you mentioned Emmett Till's mother, um, it brought me back to when I first read about how she wanted an open casket funeral, and I saw some highlights about how she experienced that, and I think that this is a moment for us to introduce to some generations
Mhm.
what that was, what that time was, and, how her insistent on people facing the ugliness of what they actually did. Can you share with the audience what that meant?
That's a good point. I mean, first of all, because I think I do presume that people know, and, I think, my students presume that I'm old enough to have lived that time, but I'm not that old.
Right.
But, so August 28th, 1955 is when, Emmett Till, a boy from Chicago, who had gone to visit relatives in Mississippi, is pulled from the Tallahatchie River with a gin fan tied around his neck. And it is at that point that his mother, Mamie Till, she becomes Mamie Till Mobley, became politicized because what she will say in her memoir that I cannot read again. That's one of the few books that I just can't do, and it is very well done.
Mhm,
Is that she was not a political woman. She thought I got out of Mississippi, and what is happening down there doesn't have anything to do with me. But when she recovered her son's body that had been in that water for some time, in August in Mississippi, it politicized her, right? I mean, and so she says to the corpse that she could smell a mile away that, like, "Darling, I will not allow your death to be in vain." So what she does, which is such a courageous act for a mother. I mean, like, nobody has a child and then you show pictures of your child and you expect people to go, "Damn," right? Like, that's not a gesture.
right.
You want people to say, "Oh, what a beautiful baby." She took that her son, who had been turned into a monstrous figure, the beating had so mangled him. At one point, she says, "Did they have to shoot him?" I mean, just excessive,
Right.
monstrous violence that had turned him into a boy that no longer looked like a human being. And instead of, being ashamed to show her son, we know her and we know him because she said, "I want you to see what they've done." Like, see what white supremacy and anti-blackness has done.
Mhm.
And they did come. So in Chicago, where she holds this funeral with this glass top casket, people came and they brought their children and they witnessed. So, right. So this happens in August, and then he's buried at Burr Oaks, and she continues to try to advocate for redress. His murderers are found not guilty. But we go on to know this story, and what happens on December 1st, 1955, is Rosa Parks says he's one of the people that she's thinking about when she refuses to give up her seat.
Mhm.
So, his death, Emmett Till's death, is linked to the birth of the modern civil rights movement as a public sort of movement of resistance.
Right.
And so every year, I mean, when we celebrate August 28th, 1963, which is the March on Washington, it's also a commemoration of Emmett Till and August 28th, 1955.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for connecting those dots. One of the reasons Rakisha and I wanted to commemorate and celebrate Black girls is because we want these stories of both our actual and what we are envisioning as our future to be told, to be remembered.
Mhm,
And what better way than to hear that from you?
mhm,
And in honor of your work and the work that you're doing and have done. And we can sometimes look back over even our generation recently of what has happened to Black sons.
mhm,
And I don't know that anyone has look more at the Black mothers of those sons that made it to the news, let alone the Black mothers of those who have not made the news yet. But society imposes this idea of strength and sacrifice and resilience on Black mothers. But how do those expectations shape the way that we see ourselves or that others see Black mothers?
That's a good question, especially, like, I think if you ask, like, young Black women of a particular generation, because for certain generations of Black women, it would have been absurd to sort of take the script of your identity from public culture. I mean, which is bell hooks' point in Our Glory, like your
Right.
grandmother, our Southern Black grandmothers were the first to curate a Black experience that
Mhm.
recuperated Black people from Mammy, Zitcoon, and Jezebel, because on your grandmother's walls was "You at your best," right?
Right.
So, right, like, you couldn't take the narrative of the culture to the point of where you began when you introduced this program, right?
Mhm.
Because that is not built for you.
Mhm.
So, like, that would be absurd. So, I still follow that same kind of dictate.
Mhm.
So, right, like, I don't take my marching orders from public culture.
Yes.
The young women I teach are situated in a very different way. I mean, because of the way that they sort of can curate their own experience of what they think of as sort of public Black expression.
Mhm.
So, right, like, they can have an Instagram page filled with this stuff, and then that becomes the representation of who and what we are.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, right, like, a part of the work that I do with young Black women is trying to sort of get them to understand in many ways how oftentimes what they're curating is in still direct response to the culture. So, there's a way in which they're always responding to some mandate that comes from without. And I don't live my life that way.
Right.
Um, so, like, it's a really, like, it is difficult, because that sort of gesture that they make to the outside world is so ingrained in how they think about Black people. So they'll say things like, well, because we're always so strong.
Mhm.
Stereotype. I mean, like, we're so human. That's what's real. So
Right.
you are a human. You have good days, bad days. You're
Right.
strong in some areas, you're weak in others.
Mhm.
I mean, that's why you need community. And
Right.
it's good when you've got people in the community, as I always sort of try to teach them, um, where it's comprised of people who are good at things that you admire, right? Like, all my friends have skills that I admire
Right.
because I'm trying to learn how to do those things. There's that. But also, when I can't do it, I know people who can.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so like, I don't know. I just think that there was a certain generation of Black folk whose archive we now have to turn to as we sort of enter into this world again that's looking like a post-Reconstruction world.
Right. Right.
Um, where like turning to those folk about how you build a full and satisfying and meaningful life, a script for that is going to be incredibly meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where I was going with this was and thank you for leading into that because the next question was going to be how do we as a people reclaim the power to define our own story and not respond to that which was
Mhm.
created.
Well, one of the things I was saying to students the other day, I know this about myself, right? Like, I know that if I enter one space and I know I wouldn't do what I did in another space, then I know that there's something wrong with whatever the text is. So, for example, I had them listen to these audio narratives that I knew they were going to think were great. But I had a critique of that I thought they would miss. So one of the things in sort of getting them to the point where they could see what I meant, the young boy who's narrating the audio narrative, he offers a portrait of his mother who suffers from mental illness, that I laughed at, okay? But I knew that I shouldn't be laughing.
Mm,
So I said to them, if we listened to this together, I wouldn't have laughed. So in other words, I would have lied,
mm,
right? Like I would have story to
mhm,
you I knew wasn't true.
mm,
If you find yourself in that position, then there's something wrong with the text,
yeah.
right? So the I think a part of how you move toward in the way that you're suggesting is and this is the thing that sort of always like makes me feel good about this generation. These young Black people, as much as they bother me sometimes, okay, I still have faith in them because they are young Black people who still will trust you if they think you're telling them the truth.
Right.
So they
Mhm,
may not like it.
right.
It's sort of like, let me see what this lady's talking about because this right.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the fact that like we still have a relationship with the truth where it's meaningful. I think
Mhm,
that's your guide. So the thing that becomes important about how we move forward is sort of recognizing that the truth is meaningful. And I kind of literally just mean your truth.
yeah.
So like if you encounter something that makes you lie in the next step, there's something wrong with the thing,
Right.
right? And
Right.
being honest about that. So having places where you honor the truth in a journal, in an audio diary, through your friendships, that is important, because what happens when you do that is then you develop a habit of truth telling.
Mhm. That is so good.
And I think the ability to continue to face the truth is what we mean by courage in an
Mm,
everyday way,
yeah.
right? And you've created a community of witness when you do that.
Mm, yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's the sort of first step. And notice that that's free.
Right.
It
Right.
doesn't require any, that you buy anything.
Yeah.
And so, right, like that's what I think those old women tell us. You have everything you need.
Everything.
Mhm.
What I love when I'm listening to you and your stories is I, part of the challenge I think that we may face this month is the focus on motherhood and people feeling
Mhm.
alienated from the focus on motherhood. But
Mhm.
the truth in Black womanhood is that there's a nurturance that comes almost as an assignment. And so
Mhm.
so many of us Black women, whether mothers or not, have an
Mhm.
assignment for
Mhm,
mothering and
mhm,
nurturance. And so
mhm,
the truth that you're telling, the statement that you made early on was, as you engage with women who may one day become mothers, but the
mhm,
truth that they face and that they learn and that they're challenged by, whether they become mothers or not, are very important. And so this celebration of Black motherhood, because we are all impacted by mothers in one way or another, it
mhm,
still encompasses everyone. And so I love the fact that the lessons that are being taught are for everyone. They're not just for
mhm,
this certain subset of group. Black womanhood is a lesson in nurturance. It is a lesson in strength and guidance and wisdom, but it is also a lesson in knowing when to say no and knowing when to acknowledge that you are not the end all be all and that you need that same nurturance that you've been giving to other women and other people in other spaces. And so I think the full circle totality of the lessons that we just been able to share in the last few minutes has just been very powerful.
Yeah.
If people can get past the word motherhood and
mhm,
I think that there's healing and there's insight for everyone, for any woman that
mhm,
comes into
mhm.
this space, and I just really love that.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant observation, right? That what you just described is the sort of invention of Black women in the conditions of enslavement,
Mm,
where your relationship to mothering wasn't always biological,
mhm,
but it was restorative. It was what you could do,
Right.
right? Like so, the creation of fictive kinship networks,
mhm,
as well as a sort of acclaimed relationship that opposed the whatever the laws were, whatever the
mhm,
bill of sale offered, right? I mean, so what you're suggesting is that acting in within that tradition is meaningful. It's a meaningful continuation of an innovation that Black people made for the sake of our own endurance that is valuable.
mhm.
And so it would be meaningful for all of us to recognize our capacity to continue to act within that tradition. And I agree.
I
Yeah,
love that.
I do too. I'm just sitting here thinking, I love us so much.
Same. Yeah, that's
And
it. Yeah.
so shifting just slightly,
Mhm,
from policy to healthcare to media, we see Black motherhood depicted,
mhm,
and Black motherhood is often depicted in a negative system that has kind of been built around the ideals of Black motherhood that don't
mhm,
necessarily meet the truth of motherhood. So, what
mhm.
would you say are some of the biggest systematic challenges that we are facing today?
Systematic. Well, I mean, to the point of your opening, I mean, nothing was built for you.
Right. That part.
I mean, all of this you're gonna have problems with. Um, so, yeah, like there's not a system, but I mean, to the point that I was sort of making about community, I think it's important that that anyone knows that you don't have to do it by yourself, right?
Yeah.
So, I had a friend who was having trouble with her son's teachers. And it was shocking to me at one point the way that she was sort of talking about the principal and the teacher as if she was like in fourth grade. And like, I don't know what, like the teacher. And I'm thinking to myself, all your friends who are teachers. So then I said to her, well, like, I'll just go with you. I'll talk. You could just be there. Okay. Which is what people will tell you if you have a cancer diagnosis. Don't go by yourself. Bring a friend because your friend will be available to ask the questions that you can't ask. Well, you could do that at the doctor's office, in the courtroom, at the school, at the principal's office.
Right.
So you don't have to do this by yourself. And we used to know that. But I think, people think, I don't know why people think we're free, but they do. And so they think that freedom looks like right, doing things independently.
Mhm.
Right.
But I just don't think that idea serves you. I think
Mhm.
it's better to understand that you don't have to do it alone.
Right.
Historically, we are a communal people, and we're a communal people living in an individualistic society, but we don't have to subscribe to the notions of individualistic mindsets. And I
Yeah.
think that the breakdown of our communities has been that it's me, myself, and I, and you don't talk to my kids, and I don't talk to your kid,
Right.
and you don't do that. And the present time is calling for and will require community. It will
Yeah.
require us to come together and lean on one another because otherwise we will be overwrought with
Mm,
fear and stress and distress and all of those things. And so I think that yeah, I
yeah.
can't say much else about that.
Yeah. I mean, because I think too that sometimes you think that right, like there's shame in not knowing.
Mhm.
And again, it's helpful to have other models. I remember years ago, I met and now I know her much better than I did, but I met Farrah Jasmine Griffin. And I was just like, "Oh my God, like, how am I gonna tell her, like, how much I love her work and, I just think she's the greatest." So I was with a friend who's also a professor, and I'm, like, trying to figure this out because we were all staying at this, like, little boutique hotel in Paris. So my friend just walks up to her and said, "Hey, Farrah, I love your work." And I'm like, "Damn, you don't say that." Like, just like that. So then I say to Farrah, "I've been trying to figure out how to say this." And she started laughing and said, "Yeah, girl, just say it," like, because, hey, sister, I love your work is enough.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Listen. And then once I figured that out, I sort of moved that way.
Yeah.
So right now, Shala Lynch works with us. And I'm like, so when someone introduced me, like just literally on an email, I'm like, girl, like free Angela and all political prisoners is my, you know? So, you know, like I know how to do that now because I understood that the sort of block was something that I had invented.
Yeah.
And so this other Black woman showed me how to do it. Because the one thing about white supremacy is that it makes us all the same woman, right? I mean, like in a white supremacist context, we're all the same woman. So a part of, and I say this to students all the time. So that means that there is no public challenge that you're going to face that I haven't faced. So if I could get a PhD, all you got to know is how I did it.
Mhm.
That means you could get one too.
Mhm.
And the benefit of being around all these Black women is we're all the same Black woman in a white supremacist context. So she the provost, she the president, she the dean. You could just ask them
Right.
and they'll tell you. I mean, that's
Mhm.
a part of what you signed up for to help. So, yeah, like remembering that, right? Like
Mhm.
the author has suggested that it's difficult to sort of speak words of love and connection and praise and honor to just another sister. But it really is very simple to do. And they'll appreciate it. You'll grow your connections, and then that becomes another sister that you can learn from.
I'm just reflecting and when you were talking about how some people no longer think about community. I'm thinking about the parts of white supremacy that is pop culture and
Mhm,
how when the music changed and
mhm,
those narratives began to be more popular and it was more pride to do things on your own, the independence of it all. It was like this was a subtle way to
mhm,
share this message that you don't need anyone else except for
mhm,
yourself.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and that just doesn't work. I think we just are all sort of better off by recognizing that, humans, we're social. That doesn't mean that you can't be introverted. I actually am,
Right.
right?
Right.
But I've learned the skill for acting in a more public way.
Mhm.
But a part of what it means to foster community is sort of like we're not making the same person. It's better when people bring a diverse set of skills and experiences.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, the thing about popular culture is that, I mean, this is the thing that King knew about violence is that, like, look, you're not going to be able to beat that army with your revolver.
Right.
That you can't win. So it's a huge machine that
Mhm.
is promoting this image. So, I mean, you really do have to have another idea, like, to act on because the narrative in the culture is about doing it alone. Um, yeah, and I that's just not an attractive narrative, to me. But what we're talking about, doing community is harder, you know? When my son was little and he was in elementary school, I was alarmed when I went to school one day to pick him up, and there was literally a sign for kids in aftercare, like, for their parents. I couldn't it advised the parents not to bring a coloring book. No, it said, like, you needed to bring your own crayons, your own coloring book that they couldn't share. I was appalled, okay? But, like, in retrospect, what I understood about sharing is that it was harder to do. Right, like, so
Mhm.
if you only got, like, a box of Crayola 64s and I want red and you want red as the teacher, now I've gotta get you to understand that, like, right, like, yeah, go ahead and use the red now, but think about the needs of this other person so that they can also have it,
Mhm.
or break it,
Mhm.
right? So you could both have a piece.
Mhm.
But you've gotta teach the skill. Well, if I require that everyone has their own, then I don't have to teach sharing,
Mm.
you know?
Wow.
Mhm.
That is what was lost. We stopped teaching sharing. Sharing is more difficult, and
Mhm,
selfishness is simple. The long game, and how, for whatever reason, in love and comfort, we get complacent, but
mhm.
hatred and anger plays the long game. Like, you
Yeah.
don't like something or don't like somebody, you hold on to that, and they maneuver and scheme and continue on their journey. But when we get to comfort and happiness, we're like, okay, things are cool, and let go and
Mhm,
stop working for that same comfort and happiness. And I think
mhm,
that that parallels in my mind. I don't know if I can articulate it well. Of that sharing thing, that the hard
mhm.
work is in the most beneficial parts. And we don't wanna always do the hard work, and so we don't keep doing it, and
Mhm.
then the bad things get to run rampant.
Yeah.
That sharing thing is that's
Yeah, because I
I
do think that I mean, like, the hatred stuff, I mean, you see it in the larger culture. It's easy to destroy something,
yeah,
you know? Right? You just take
yeah,
a hammer and just start hitting. But to build things, especially something that's going to last, you gotta plan. You gotta maybe sacrifice for the right materials.
yeah,
It may mean that, like, the thing that you wanted, you can't have all of that if you want the quality of this thing. So it
right,
may cost you something, right?
yeah,
So I think that that's the thing about what is constructive and what is loving is that it costs more,
mm,
but it's more valuable
mm,
in that, in that, I mean, it costs more in terms of what you might have to give up, but it's for the sake of, community,
yeah,
right? So there's that beautiful scene in Beloved where the nephew sees Setha and the baby crossing a river.
Oh, yeah.
So his uncle tells him to take his jacket off and give it to the baby. So the boy says, "Well, what am I gonna wear?" Right? So the uncle said, "Fine. Keep your jacket, like take your jacket from the baby and put it back on. But if you can do that, then get out of here."
mhm,
Right.
So the boy takes it off and gives it to him. So what you understand then is about that boy is that he understood that I'd rather be in community and uncomfortable than
mm,
be comfortable outside of
by
it.
myself. Mhm,
Right? But that was the lesson that his uncle taught him as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
We value the people who can make the sacrifice for the one who has least.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
baby cannot warm himself or herself,
Yeah.
right? So I think that that's that used to be, what like we taught children how to practice community. Now we just tell the parents to just buy stuff for your individual child. I mean,
Mhm.
that's just absurd. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Absurd. This is a
Yeah.
lot to marinate on.
Yeah. Cause I used to always say when my son was in elementary school, I never understood it. Like I never understood the list. When you got the list of school supplies, because in my head, I was buying things for the class, right? Like,
Mhm,
so I was buying like Kleenex for the class, paper for the class, not for my individual son,
mhm,
you know,
mhm,
because when I was in school, that's how it looked,
mhm,
so like each person bought, Kleenex or they bought um paper and then it became the class set.
mhm,
So, but I don't think it ever worked out like that, and it was never clear to me that that was how the teacher understood it, but I would say things to my son like, you know, you have a responsibility to share this stuff. I mean, I didn't just get this for you. So it might mean like here, like I can afford two pair of scissors. Um, so here two in case someone needs it. Like here two pencils, you know. So like I can do that, but also what you could do is share yours.
Mhm.
share,
Lord.
share. Oh,
Mm,
Wow. That sharing thing just wiped
mhm,
me out.
yeah.
I never thought about it that way, but it's so true. It's so true.
mhm. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Yeah, but but I think we'd be better off, if we understood things that way, like as a mother, I do think that, and I don't know if I think there are things that becoming biologically having my own child, it clarified things for me. As a younger woman, when I was teaching, I had always imagined that I was going to be at this big R1. And then, like, I didn't like that didn't work out, but I was okay with, like, okay, like I'm adjusting to this new vision. But then I had this concern, like, but I feel like the things that students were asking me for, it felt like they wanted me to mother.
Mhm.
It took me having a child to realize, no, that's not what this is. Right? Like I'm not doing that.
Mhm,
Um, so like it clarified what it is to sort of parent your own child. But recently, I made this assignment and it was all around joy. I'm the first year experience faculty coordinator. So I designed this lesson around joy. And I surprised myself. And I said this to the students. At one point, I was basically a witness to them laughing. And it was
mhm,
so meaningful to me to hear them laugh. And what I said to them was the thing that surprised me is that it felt like they were my children, and it
Mhm.
felt good to hear them laugh.
mm,
It felt like I was doing something for their mothers as well, like, that it was sort of like if your mother called me, I could say, "You had a good day today. Your daughter she laughed."
Mhm.
Like, it was as if I could record something for her that I knew would be important to her to know. And, that was new, I'd never experienced that before.
mm. That's, definitely a part of something that we have discussed in the background about, um, when we were preparing for your conversation.
Mhm,
Um, if we are not sharing these moments of joy and hope, is
mhm,
there space for sharing in grief? And,
mhm,
like,
mhm,
are we
mhm,
are we still carrying those things by ourselves? And
mhm,
and how do we identify, right? Like, how do we
mhm,
bridge the gap to say, I'm acknowledging that I have been grieving by myself. What does it look like for me to say, I need help or I need presence?
mhm,
Or I have a moment to celebrate. And
mhm,
what does it look like for me to approach you to say, will you celebrate with me? Now,
mhm,
I personally will say that. But others may not be like, oh, will you celebrate with me? I will gladly invite you into my space to celebrate.
mhm.
But what do
Yeah.
we say to the community, if, there's been this narrative that Black motherhood is too much or too this, too that, um, and you don't feel the freedom and you don't give yourself the permission to
Mhm.
say, "Can you be with me in whatever emotion I'm feeling right now?"
Well, first, I mean, the way that you even phrased it reminded me of the Lucille Clifton poem, Won't You Celebrate With Me, right? Like
Mhm.
that ends, Won't you celebrate me that every day something tried to destroy me and failed. But I think that instead of it, like the way that she frames it is sort of what I was saying about when the first time when I met Thera, is that like I made it more complicated. And instead of a question, Lucille Clifton makes it an invitation.
Mhm.
Well, right.
Mhm.
So it's a nice way of sort of inviting someone in. But the thing is that she's already begun the celebration.
Right.
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 So I think it's like recognizing that that's your source.
Yeah.
In my own practice, and I do sort of think about it as a practice of living and being in community with people. I realized that I said to someone, a community of people, actually, a group of people,
Mhm.
like, oh, if there's anything I can do, let me know. And what I understood about that later was that that's not helpful.
Right.
Because like good writing, right? Like I should have been definite, specific, and concrete.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I then came back later and I said, listen, what I can do is I can write these letters of recommendation. I can serve on this committee. I can help you with this project.
Mhm.
So I think that like the model is, you learn about the death of someone and then you bring food to the family.
Right.
I can make this macaroni and cheese. I can bring this, 12 pack of Pepsi. I can give you $25. This is what I can do.
Right.
So, a part I think what we actively have to sort of realize that we're doing in the practice of our living is recognizing, like, if we're wearing a jacket and how you can give it to the baby, like, like thinking about how you can contribute. What do you bring
Yeah.
that's tangible,
Yeah.
right? Um, and it might sometimes be your labor,
Mhm.
right? It may not be that you have money,
Yeah.
or it might just be that you have a right. It might be like I understand, like, these kids sometimes are coming to my office. It's not with a paper. They're asking me for my insight.
Mhm.
I understand that that helps people.
Mhm.
So, but like, right, recognizing what those gifts are, what the situation needs, and what you can bring.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's how you have the party.
That's
It's
awesome. Right. Right. Awesome.
All right. So I just love to listen to you talk, you know that. But I love the way that you tell stories. And so my question to you, as we are coming to a close on this, if you could write a story about Black motherhood, what would
Mhm.
it look like? What would the story be? Kind of just the basic plot premise of that story.
Well, I mean, maybe the one that I'm writing is about a friend saying years ago, before we were mothers, and just sort of talking about the kind of women we wanted to be. She said to me, well, I'm so happy that I'll have someone who can support me in mothering in this way that we've been discussing, that's sort of counter to the way that other people are talking about it. And it stuck with me because I had never really thought about needing support for a countercultural idea.
Mm.
And now I realize that I'm strong enough to do it, but I do know that I'm doing it, right? Like, so my son, I'm very clear that he has the right to be whoever he asks God to be. So, Morrison, makes this point that, she thinks that we did ask to be here. So what I'll say to students is, your job is to figure out what it is you said to God, because whatever that was, it was so compelling you were granted life. And once you figure out what
Wow.
that is, that's your purpose. So I think that what I'm supposed to do as a mother is to nurture my child into his purpose. And the purpose is not to be my duplicate,
Mm.
or to do it the way I do it.
Yeah.
I said to him today, because he was talking about being an introvert and he's comfortable with that. That's great. But I said to him, but at some point you will have a better experience of life if you recognize that you want to get the ball sometimes. Because like everything you're asking me is about you don't seem to recognize it, but it's about being on defense, how you respond to someone. But your life is gonna be in playing offense, right? Like, so you have to have the ball. You gotta design the play. Otherwise, right, like you're always just reacting.
Mhm,
So, like that always gonna keep right. You're literally kept on the defensive.
mhm,
So you've got to figure out, like, given this information I've told you, how you play offense with that. So I think my story really is about how you parent your child, right? To give to the community, to be a contribution that is his, not in competition with someone else, right? Like, not where, I've got to make it so that you look like these other kids.
mhm,
Uh, and that isn't a challenge for me,
mhm,
personally, because I just sort of find the way that I'm doing it, befitting and attractive for who I am as a person. But I
mhm.
think that that would be the story. I mean, it's the one that I'm kinda writing through how I live.
I love that.
I do too. I'm remembering what to say to the audience to reflect on this conversation. I was going in so many places. This is my first time hearing you. It's my first time and I'm loving it. And I was seriously was over here thinking, how can I get in one of her classes? I said, I said, I'm done with school. I'm not doing anything else. But I really am like, oh, now I'm gonna have to apply and then get to the class. Like, am I really doing this? This is really the conversation I'm having in my head right now.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Of course. No, I love that you have just shared with us today so much about what it is to share and
Mm,
what it is to take the best of who we are and to
mhm,
pass it on to other generations, and, you said it, I don't need you even as a mother to duplicate who I am and what I do and how I do it, but here are the assets. You go do what you need to do with them,
mhm,
and my other thing that I'm remembering is if you've got the jacket, are you gonna take it off and give it to the baby?
Mhm. That's it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's That's pretty
yeah.
powerful, Dr. Michelle. And I'm loving that we're able to just reflect on how we see ourselves, how we see our community. We are hoping that this opens up people's minds to allow them to reflect on how they're living day to
Mhm,
day, how we can continue going through National Black Girl Month in celebration,
mhm,
and then to create the stories and to tell the stories. And those who've never heard of the Emmett Till story and what
mhm,
his mother went through, and them reflecting on, am I a mother that do I need someone to celebrate me?
mhm,
And I just ask the question, will you celebrate me? Will
mhm,
you, you
mhm.
know, or can you sit with me in my grief for a moment? And if you don't know what to give,
What do
you
you
got a
have?
Pepsi?
Mhm,
What do you have?
mhm,
You know?
Yeah.
So many good things. We always get to the end of these things and there's just so much more that we could say and do, and we just again want to say thank you, and thank you to our listeners. Thank you for joining us. We pray that you are with us in the group and that you will join the movement in many ways. You can visit us at nationalblackgirlmonth.com. We're going to continue this conversation in those spaces and continue the series with other powerful voices that are shaping the landscape of Black motherhood and identity. And again, Dr. Michelle, if people want to connect with you, how can they do that?
Well, girl, I don't know. I mean, I don't want them sending me emails. I'm not on social media, so
That's fine.
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know how to answer that.
I
They put
think
it in her books and her publications.
I was
Start
gonna
there.
say, yes.
Yeah. You can invite me into something and maybe I'll come.
Right.
No, no,
It's
no.
okay.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
okay. We'll talk about how we can get you an assistant.
Yeah.
Remember all the incoming.
Yeah, we'll do another episode on truth and motherhood because it was true.
That's it. That's it. That's how we all connect. Another episode. Found it. You know.
Here's
Yeah.
how I'm gonna take a class. We got
All this connection. You know. No.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Welcome. You're welcome.
The best leaders know that strategy happens in real time, in the right room, with the right people. That's why I created Momentum Lab, where creatives and change makers meet weekly to break down challenges, refine their strategies, and move forward with momentum. If you're ready to sharpen your next move, join us at lab.feliciafordandco.com. Hey, Changemaker, real quick before you go, if today's episode helped you in some way, the best way to thank me is to head over to Apple Podcasts, subscribe to the channel, and leave a review. I'd also love to connect with you over on social. You can find me at Friends Call Me Fee. Until next time, keep changing the game.